is currently being held northbound from junction 10 to 9 at Ellesmere Port, where a lorry is on fire. On the M6 in the West Midlands, one lane's closed northbound from junction 10 to 10A towards the M54 following an accident. And there are queues heading away from London up the M1 from junction 6 to 8 up towards Hemel Hempstead towards Hertfordshire after a lorry broke down earlier on. Heading into London on the M4, the inside lane's blocked off from junction 4 to 3 Heathrow to Hayes following an accident. In East London, Woolwich Manor Way at Beckton blocked following an accident, and it's really still on the M20 in Kent. One lane shut Coast Banner Junction 4 at Leybourne following a collision. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player app. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good evening. A big farmers' protest in London today. The question I want to ask is, was that just a howl of anguish and outrage, or is it the beginning, perhaps, of a rural revolt in this country? Retailers getting very worried about the impact of the budget on the economy. I'm going to ask the question, could the Chancellor have done this differently? And it looks like senior Labour figures are saying they'd rather choose the European Union over Donald Trump. And that's all because of the threat to China of tariffs. But before all of that, let's get the news with Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Nigel. The time is just after 7 o'clock, and these are your latest headlines. Farming leaders have accused the Chancellor of refusing to engage with them over controversial changes to inheritance tax. That's as thousands of farmers have marched on Westminster today. First unveiled in Rachel Reeves' budget, the plans to impose inheritance tax on farms worth more than £1 million have sparked fury among rural communities. Speaking at the protests in Westminster, Shadow Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Victoria Atkins says the impact on farmers will be huge.
If older members of the family live past March 2026 when this change comes in, then they are faced with an enormous inheritance tax bill when that dear beloved relative passes on. And when I say, huge bills, we're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds, possibly even over £1 million.
Among the thousands of farmers attending the protests today, there have also been many of the future generation hoping to take over their family's farm one day. Earlier, one of the farmer hopefuls told GB News he wants the government to rethink.
It's just important because family farms are what have provided food for England through 2 world wars and up to now. So it's a vital part of our economy. It's a way of life. It's not a job. I've been brought up around farming, and I can't really imagine my life without it. I just want people to listen. I just want the government to hear what we're saying and at least have a look, go back to the drawing board and just see if they can do it better and help more family farms like us.
Elsewhere, Northamptonshire police have confirmed that 24-year-old Harshita Bella, who was found murdered in East London last week, was killed by strangulation. Officers attended her address following concerns for her welfare last Wednesday, leading to her body being located in the boots of a car in the Ilford area of London. Police are still searching for her husband, whom they've said is suspected of killing Harshita and then fleeing the country. A getaway driver who helped 4 teenagers kill 2 boys with machetes during a case of mistaken identity has been jailed for life for murder and will serve a minimum of 38 years in prison. 45-year-old Anthony Snook drove 18-year-old Riley Tolliver and boys aged 15, 16 and 17 to and from Knowle West in Bristol, where they murdered Mason Rist and Max Dixon. The 2 boys died from stab wounds after being chased by the 4 armed teenagers in January of this year. Meanwhile, following widespread snow and ice today, the UK is preparing for further bad weather over the coming days. A new ice warning has now come into force for much of southern England, the Midlands and eastern Wales, which will remain in place until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. That's alongside several other warnings for snow and ice issued across the UK, as the Met Office has issued warnings that vehicles could be stranded, power cuts may occur and rural areas could be cut off. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in the next hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening. I think somebody in the Treasury got their sums wrong when they were advising the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. You see, the Labour government say it's not a problem. 75% of farms just won't be affected by these new inheritance tax rules. And yet the National Farmers Union themselves say it will be at least 2/3. I have to say, my conclusion on all of this is the small farmer, somebody running 5 or 10 acres, a smallholder basically, will be fine. The giant agribusinesses, they'll be fine as well. It's the people in the middle that simply won't be fine. Property prices over the last few years have rocketed. Land prices too. In fact, in Lincolnshire, an acre of land now is about £30,000 an acre. And it is true that some billionaires have bought up vast tracts of farmland without ever intending to farm them themselves as a way of avoiding inheritance tax. But what this proposal does is to hit families running farms, families whose incomes are incredibly modest, far more modest than I think most people believe. They've got an asset, yes, that's worth a lot of money. Although, for many of them, it isn't just about money. It's about a way of life that's been going on for generations. And I would ask people to think, our countryside is admired the world over. People love the British countryside, and one of the reasons is those families have farmed it so well for so long. Now, this was far from the first time that I've been out with the rural communities protesting in this country. I was out 20 years ago, protesting against the hunting ban. Indeed, 406,000 of us marched on that countryside march. We weren't listened to by the government at all. It kind of didn't matter because it was the Conservatives that held the rural constituencies, not Labour, and Blair wasn't bothered. This time, it may be different. Well, I turned up on parade. I have to say, on a personal level, I was really, really thrilled at the welcome that I received from people queuing up in Whitehall. Well, that was very touching, but it summed up the day. People were, despite their fears, and by the way, I've visited farmers in Essex who've literally been in tears talking about this because they're really, really scared about the impact. But in fact, the atmosphere was amazing. It was upbeat, it was jolly, it was peaceful. I barely heard a swear word all day. It was extraordinary. It was a remarkably British thing. That's how we do it. But I did hear one or two people saying, well, maybe we ought to be a bit more like the French. Whether that's really good advice, I don't know. Can we make any progress with this? Well, Jeremy Clarkson was there, which was good to see, given the recent medical problems that he's had. And I think he feels, as much as I feel, that something can be done about this. And here's the reason why. Labour now have somewhere between 70 and 100 seats they won at the election in rural or semi-rural constituencies. And I think what this movement now needs to do is not just to get together in London, but to be seen in market towns all over this country, especially ones that Labour won by very narrow margins at the next general election. I always knew that the hunting ban was going to come in. I always knew that no one would listen. But this time, I think we can get a change. I think we can get a serious revision of that starting level. Well, the Prime Minister was interviewed by GB News' Chris Hope earlier on today in South America at the G20. Doesn't look like he intends at this stage to budge.
Very important for me to keep making the case that it's only farms and assets over £3 million in a typical case, yes, of parents wanting to pass on to their children, and therefore for that reason I'm confident that the vast majority of farms will not be affected. I grew up in a rural area. I know firsthand that rural areas, farming communities, they do need the investment that we put in the budget.
There we are. He's not budging. My question for you at home. Is this just the start of a rural revolt? Yes or no? Give me your thoughts. Farage at gbnews.com. Liz Webster, who's been on this programme a few times before, founder of Save British Farming. I guess in one way you must have been quite pleased to see so many people there.
It was a great day and a fantastic turnout, and I thought it would be a big turnout because there's so much emotion and anger. And it's not just farmers, because there's lots of other sectors that feed into farming, as well as local people. I mean, from my village, the local pub owners were there today. Yep. And people feel as if it's an attack on rural communities in particular. And it's not just about the inheritance tax. There's many other things that are going on as well, particularly with the national insurance changes that's hitting small and medium-sized businesses. But it also, as you refer to big businesses, big agricultural businesses, they're hit too. I know one of the country's biggest raspberry growers, his wages bill has gone up by £4.2 million. And he just doesn't have the money to pay that. And what it means is that that raspberry business might no longer exist. And there's nowhere to import those raspberries in from. So we might be raspberryless because of this government.
Interesting. I mean, your point about it's not just IHT, I agree with you. Actually, a lot of farmers very unhappy with the growth of solar energy, not happy with rewilding, not happy with what net zero targets might mean. And we've seen this revolt happening all across Europe in terms of nitrates, in terms of carbon. But I also felt, Liz, today, and I talked to lots of people today, a real feeling that an urban elite that make the rules are completely disconnected from the rural countryside.
The problem is Keir Starmer promised to be better than what we've seen before, especially in terms of lying and, you know, being honest. And he went to the National Farmers Union and promised that he wouldn't do this. And he didn't just promise, he actually empathised with the loss of a family farm. And farmers are very down-to-earth people and they're very genuine. And if they shake on a deal, they shake on a deal. And he has gone to our conference. He didn't say it in Parliament or he didn't say it in his constituency. He said it in the Farmers' Conference. And that has really, really irked people. And he's also now he's relying on information, data, which even DEFRA don't agree with, which we all know is false. And it was shown today because everybody there put their hand up who knows that their farm is impacted by it. I mean, in my village, the house down the road just sold for £1.5 million. It's got a quarter of an acre. I mean, it's also like forcing us to take out our underwear drawer and wash it in public. You know, these details about the value of your farm is really, really personal. And there we are working day in, day out, 7 days a week, often through the night when you're lambing and calving. And the gratitude that we've had from the Labour Party, who said they were going to be a friend of the farmers, to repay us with this, and also then to actually insult our intelligence by using data which is wrong. And they keep repeating the same lies over and over and over again. And it's being forced down our necks. And they're not even listening to... I mean, there's plenty of agricultural accountants out there and specialist agents, and they won't listen to any of them. They're just relying on Treasury figures, which are wrong. And there is no consideration for food.
No.
Everybody needs food.
No, not even discussed.
And the world is, you know, in a very difficult place, and there's no consideration. We are about to get food shortages anyway because of the flooding in Spain. And we've lost 2 of our very biggest salad growers because the last government didn't keep the greenhouses open. A lot of the Lee Valley growers have gone because of the gas prices. We are heavily reliant on Spain for fresh food in the winter. We've had a mild autumn, and I can tell you now you're going to start to see real shortages. And that's before the farmers begin to hold back food. And this government haven't considered what impact that is going to have on the stability of the country. And if I was an advisor to Keir Starmer, I would be pushing that forward. We've had some very difficult riots in these last few months. Do we want to have that again? No, we don't. Think about the food system. Even the supermarket bosses are saying this is going to cause problems on the shelves.
This dimension...
Why would you invite food shortages?
I think what you just said adds a very large amount to this debate. I'm joined by Sir John Redwood, former Conservative Member of Parliament, and Alex Cairns, political commentator and founder of Youth Vote UK. Alex, the point at the end about potential food problems, that was quite impactful, wasn't it?
Look, I understand that there's going to be frustration not just in your sector, but actually in lots of sectors. You know, look, there's people complaining that the last few years have been tough. Obviously, post-COVID, the economy has struggled. Obviously, we've seen lots of people leaving the UK because of, you know, Brexit or a range of factors where lots of sectors have been struggling. And it's a very, very complicated issue. But let's remember, right, about the IFS say that about 20-25% of farms are going to be affected with this, right? Whether you agree with that or not, we can discuss that, right? But actually a significant amount of farms. I mean, the idea, right, for a long time, inheritance tax has been exempt in this sector, right? Why should ordinary people that have property, that have to pay 40% inheritance tax, be penalised, but the farmers don't have to do that?
Because the farmers are the stewards of the countryside, and without them, our country wouldn't look the way that it does.
You can easily exempt it, because all you have to do is say any working farmer who's earning the majority of their income from a farm can be exempt. It's that simple. And then Jeremy Clarkson, who we know earns a fortune through television, will have to pay inheritance tax on his farm. But I would say Jeremy Clarkson has been brilliant. I mean, he farms near to me. For that area, he's brought in a huge amount of money for Chipping Norton. He's done an enormous job in talking to people about what farming needs.
He was clear today.
But this politics of envy is so ghastly.
Clarkson was clear today. It's not about me. It's about the struggling family farmer. John, the Prime Minister saying, well, don't worry, because very few people qualify, and anyway, you know, you could get up to 3 million before you start to pay this. How does that work?
How wrong he is, and as we've heard, he broke a very important promise to family farmers, and we need to keep those family farms together. A farm of 200 acres with a farmhouse could easily be worth more than £3 million. You make very little money on it. A lot of farmers would say we need a bigger unit than 200 acres. And these people want to split them up or throw them out altogether. They want to put them out on the streets because they'll have to sell a load of the land in order to pay the tax, and then they won't have any unit at all.
You say these people. We know 40% of farms are owned by institutional investors, right? There's a lot of people...
a lot that. We're talking about the family farms.
No. A big portion of farms and estates are owned by private investors, right? There's been a double standard. Ordinary people that have worked hard to pay off their mortgage and have an asset of, say, above £500,000 will have to pay inheritance tax. Are you telling me that there should be a situation for farmers and then for private tenants, you know, they should be penalised? It's already a double standard.
We don't want to penalise the tenants either, and the government you support is penalising all farmers with this massive increase.
The problem is,
we just heard 3/4 are not going to be included in this.
Well, I tell you what.
That's a different point, though.
That figure, Alex, is for the birds. You sound deeply unsympathetic towards our family farms in this country, who've, in some cases, been on the land for hundreds of years. You don't care about them, do you?
No. It's not that I don't care about them. I just know that the UK economy has taken a hit the last few years. Every sector, there's been difficult choices. The corporation tax under the last Conservative government went up by 90% to 25%.
Can I just ask you,
small businesses have been affected.
Why didn't you go then for the subsidies that you're paying to North American landowners to chop down trees, chip it and bring it here to burn a supposedly green energy? That's costing us £500 million a year. If you got rid of those subsidies to Drax Power, and then we could actually support our farmers and do as I said, exempt any farmer that's earning most of their income from the farm. And that includes tenant farmers, because tenant farmers, I don't know if you've gone out and seen how much tractors cost and all of the machinery that you need to run a farm.
And the profit margins.
And the cost of your stock.
The last couple of years have been rotten years as well, haven't they? The weather's been terrible.
Tenant farmers were there today, and they are as angry as the landowning farmers. And there's often farmers that are a mixture of both.
But Liz, I'm going to draw stumps on this because, actually, I'll tell you why. This debate's just started.
Yes.
No. Today was not the end of this.
It's a marathon.
I believe today was the beginning, and I think we're going to see some kind of rural revolt. And I think the most powerful point Liz made, apart from the food argument, is this doesn't just affect the farmers, it affects the pub. It affects the local engineering company. It affects the whole rural economy.
But we do need to grow a lot more food.
No.
I failed to get through to in the last Parliament.
Well, no more rewilding.
It's a big Brexit opportunity which we've missed.
No more rewilding, no more solar farms. Let's grow food.
Spend the money on the food.
Right, OK, we're going to take a break. It's interesting, it does raise a lot of emotions. And
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The BBC has been branded jaw-achingly stupid, not by me, by the way, over its decision to cast black and ethnic minority actors in the historical drama of Wolf Hall. Now, is this a forward-thinking idea or nonsense? And are we rewriting history? Henry, I mean, the Tudors were real-life people. They were pretty much white.
Well, some of these shows depart so much from historical context anyway that maybe it doesn't make any difference. But I think just generally we've got a problem in this country with portraying history in its correct sense. You can't change history. And I think it's about the motivation. If the motivation is to sort of to some sort of, you know, to make a political point, then I think it's wrong.
What I find kind of tedious about people finding this instant jaw-droppingly stupid, Jesus was portrayed by somebody who's half Slovak and half Irish. Moses was portrayed in the Exodus by an Englishman. So, you know, same with Anne Boleyn, you know, was portrayed by Natalie Portman, who is Jewish. So if this is the one thing that's getting people angry, then there's something deeper within that rage, because I think Hollywood's been doing that, where people...
When you say something deeper, do you think there is a hidden racism and people are complaining about this?
Well, I think for some, maybe, yes. I can't speak for everybody because this news dropped today. I don't know why they are thinking that it's egregious. But there absolutely must be some underlying racism if this is the only one that you're upset about.
GB News, the People's Channel. Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your turn from home. I asked you, is this just the start of what might become a rural revolt or just a cry of anguish? John says, the way the government are saying the farmers are trying to deny the NHS the extra money it needs is nauseating. They are capable of low stunts, but that's the lowest. Their attempt to derail farmers via a guilt trip will not work. Mick says, unless Starmer and his lying cronies are not careful, there will also be an urban revolt, a pensioners' revolt, a foreign policy revolt, and a two-tier policing revolt. This is the worst government of my lifetime. How can they be removed? They can't. They have a massive parliamentary majority, and nothing short of a dramatic economic collapse would remove this government. And folks, I'm sorry, but that is the reality. Tony says, Starmer says it's 3 million for a husband and wife, but if one dies, it will no longer be 3 million, it will drop when they die, so their kids pay more. Yeah, I thought he was being very disingenuous, frankly, using that 3 billion figure. Now, the ramifications of this budget roll on into other sectors other than farming. A report by the British Retail Consortium suggesting that actually the real burdens here of national insurance rates, of minimum wage increases, and additional burdens from business rates that will be coming in are frankly very, very painful. Liz talked about the biggest raspberry producers in the country, but actually even firms like Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Next are saying they may well have to lay staff off. I met a GP's practice last week who already have laid off 2 staff. So worried are they that the average increase in employers' national insurance is £1,000 per year for somebody on the average salary. Now, Alex, you know, all sorts of governments put forward budgets and there's an outcry. You know, we had the pasty tax with George Osborne and all sorts of rows. This budget, if you're in the public sector, doesn't affect you at all. It's purely a hit on the private sector.
Well, look, I looked at the situation with income tax, corporation tax, and I knew that somewhere, you know, whether you agree with the 9 billion figure or the 22 billion figure, there was an economic black hole where we had to, I know John won't agree with this, but we had to look at taxes, right? And I think for a long time, a lot of working people didn't want income tax to go up. You know, 1 to 2% increase in national insurance isn't going to cause, you know, I think there's a lot of dramatic, you know, naturally businesses don't want any tax to go in. Oh, sorry, yeah.
Calm down.
Just so passionate. No tax, no one wants any tax to go up, right? But there has to be a situation where if you're not going to raise income tax, you're not going to raise corporation tax, which we saw went up last time, you know, where are you going to get the money from, John? You know, that's
although in truth, people's income tax is going up because they've frozen the rates, dragging more and more people into things like 40p tax. I mean, we are paying, as a country, our tax burden, it went up enormously under the last government. We're paying more and more money, and I wonder for what sometimes.
Well, look, the situation is we know that the NHS obviously needed lots of capital social care. We know that, you know, schools... I read an awful report the other day that there's teachers in Blackpool where they were having to... you know, the washing machines of some of their students' mums and dads weren't working. They were having to do lots more. I mean, you know, the public and private sector is always being pitted against each other, and we know that there needs to be some money put into the public sector.
That's the argument, John. The argument is, look, you know, they've inherited a terrible economic situation, and they had to raise taxes in the budget. and they didn't have many other options.
Fastest growing G7 economy for the first half of the year at last before they took over, and the growth, of course, has fallen off a cliff now because of this dreadful budget, 2% inflation.
But is that a confidence
thing? It wasn't a bad inheritance, and the alleged overrun in the finances are grossly exaggerated. Most of it was the extra pay awards made by this government, giving considerably more than the previous government have been willing to give in order to settle some strikes. But the thing they've got to do is get a grip on spending. The last government wasn't very good at this either. The Bank of England is going to lose taxpayers more than the 22 billion alleged overrun this year. And it's planning to lose, according to the OBR, £240 billion between 2022 and the final run-off of its bonds. It is a disgrace. It should do what the ECB is doing. You might even find that amusing.
There you are.
They are limiting the losses considerably compared with the Bank of England by following different policies, or do what the Fed is doing. All three banks made the same mistake, printing too much money and buying too many bonds, but the Bank of England is uniquely losing much more and sending the bill to the taxpayer, which
Rachel Reeves was a top economist at the Bank of England.
Well, so we hear. Well, I wish you'd look at their accounts and why did they waste so much money on bonds and why are they now making so many losses? Another big area that this government's introduced, 19 billion for carbon capture and storage. Waste of money. Make our energy and high energy using businesses even less competitive than they are already, because it's all extra cost. It's not an investment. If you stop those kind of expenditures, you don't need all this extra tax. Indeed, you could have some tax cuts, because I can find you more than they actually needed to raise to meet their own spending requirements. And what about the productivity? Public sector productivity since 2019 has dropped off a cliff under both governments. And what is the plan to get it back? The new Labour government rightly says it wants to get back to pre-2019 levels. You wouldn't have thought that was that difficult. That may be 30 billion of savings.
That point John makes is a very powerful point. That the size, our bureaucracy, our civil service grows and grows and grows. The budget grows and grows and grows. And we keep hearing that work from home, 4-day week being demanded by some of the civil service unions, and yet their record in delivery for the taxpayer is pretty disgraceful.
Well, the 4-day working week is an interesting debate because actually there's a lot of reports that indicate that actually productivity wouldn't necessarily go down. You know, it can be done in a certain way where some companies encourage people. Look, people are very unproductive, right? They go for coffee breaks, they go for cigarette breaks. So the 4-day working week, I don't share that view that if every company goes towards that, people are not going to be productive.
I'm just saying, let's get back to doing what we're doing in 2019.
And also, John,
asking too much.
We talk about wastage. I mean, the last government wasted £2 billion on wasted PPE. We had a situation with the Rwanda plan that didn't work. I mean, look, every government has wasted money. You know that, right?
That's right. But the broader point...
I told you, I think it is some of this
broader point
under the last government.
Is we're spending vast amounts of money employing public servants who are delivering less and less.
Yeah, that's the danger.
That's really important.
Too many people bossing people around and writing reports to each other, not enough people serving the public. We got these top-heavy organisations.
So actually, I agree with you. On the NHS, I think there's a common consensus across the aisle that actually, you know, we need to look at bureaucracy within the NHS. A lot of wastage. I definitely agree with that. You look at, there's middle management that potentially can be cut. But actually, you talk about the strikes. The strikes was wasting a lot of money, you know, and actually the government came in to their credit and solved that problem. Whether you agree or not, there was a lot of wastage.
They should have done productivity deals. They shouldn't just have given.
Yeah, the money should have been reliant on something. Yeah. Look, I tell you what, it's this again is one of those debates that will run and run. I actually genuinely believe that you at home, the taxpayer, have a right to be pretty angry about the way in which your money is being spent. In a moment, we will discuss Donald Trump. Yes, we will. We've got a difficult situation here. Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, seems to think that actually the European Union is a bigger priority. And yet with Brexit, can't we have the best of both worlds? Yeah,
Good evening. I'm here with your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Lots of cold weather around at the moment, some harsh frosts, also some wintry showers in places too. But why is it unseasonably cold? Well, the low pressure system that brought the last night's heavy rain and snow for some parts has now cleared away towards the east, and that's allowed for us to drag in our air from the north, a cold direction, bringing Arctic air to many places. It is quite a clear air mass though, so for many it's actually going to be dry overnight, the exception being in places exposed to that brisk northerly wind where we will see frequent wintry showers with some snow accumulations building up in places and icy patches too. Because of the clear skies and that northerly wind, temperatures plummeting tonight. A widespread harsh frost across parts of Scotland. Temperatures last night dropped to -11, and it could be even colder than that this coming night, -12 perhaps in some places with lying snow. First thing tomorrow morning, a harsh frost then across Scotland. Watch out for some icy patches and some lying snow in places, particularly towards the north. A similar story across parts of Northern Ireland, down the eastern side of England and also into parts of Wales. Here there will be some fairly frequent showers, and they could quite readily be falling as sleet or snow, and so some disruption is quite likely as we go through the morning rush hour. Elsewhere and further inland, a lot of dry weather to be had, and it is generally going to stay dry and sunny as we go through tomorrow. But still, in areas exposed to that brisk northerly wind, we will continue to see some showers, and they could penetrate a bit further inland at times. These temperatures are significantly below average for the time of year, and when you factor in some strong winds coming from the north, it is going to feel bitterly cold. As we go into Thursday, there is the potential for some unsettled weather to push into the southwest. Bit of uncertainty, we could see some heavy rain, perhaps even some snow over the higher ground here. Further north, it's a similar day to today really. Wintry showers continuing to pile in from the north, otherwise some sunny spells. By Saturday, things are looking very wet and windy indeed. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Forgot about that. So it's the old debate. Which way should the UK look? Should we look towards Europe or should we look towards America? Now, Jonathan Reynolds, who was the business secretary, despite never actually having ever worked in business, when confronted with this, made it perfectly clear that we had to choose the EU over America. And he says that because the volume of business we currently do with Europe is bigger than that we do with America. We also had a leading American economist, Steve Moore, someone that advises President Trump, saying Britain's got to decide. Does it go with the European model or does it go with an American model? Now, folks, I think this is nonsense, and here's why. We've left the European Union. We have a tariff-free deal, albeit it's not the easiest deal. There are still difficulties over borders, but we do have a tariff-free deal. And that leaves us, as far as I can see, free to do a deal with Donald Trump, which he would want to do with us, which wouldn't just be about tariff reduction, but would go further than that. But I wonder, Alex Cairns, was what Jonathan Reynolds was really saying that whatever happens, this government wants to get closer to the European Union?
I think for a long time, you know, we've been talking about farming today. There's lots of sectors where their main, I guess, source of income is the EU, you know. Obviously, the USA, we know about financial services, we know about tourism, you know, there's a few other sectors, obviously, with tech. But actually, there's a lot of agricultural companies, there's a lot of small businesses that do the majority of their trade with the EU. So strategically, it's very, very important. I agree with you, we should be doing both. Everyone knows that. I don't think Jonathan Reynolds is necessarily saying that we shouldn't. But I think that Donald Trump does make the assumption that probably he thinks the UK is almost, you know, going to go with a begging pot and say that we need you, and actually the EU is still our most important trading partner.
That's true. But John Rebel, I was looking at some amazing figures the other day that showed the size of the American economy was almost exactly the same as the size of the European Union economy 15 years ago. It's now doubled the size of the European economy. And I'm not saying, by the way, we should cut off trade with Europe or anything like that, but aren't we free here to do whatever we want?
Yes, I want us to follow the British way, and there will be times when we agree with the Americans, times when we agree with the EU. As someone who has in the past been responsible for industrial companies selling things, I knew that if I was selling to the Europeans, I had to follow their rules. If I was selling to the Americans, I had to follow their rules. I didn't want to be told I'd got to always adopt the European rules, because that would have got in my way of actually selling to the Americans more easily. So we are in a very good position in Brexit. And what I think we need to debate is our response to tariffs. And I think if the EU just has a big hissy fit and imposes very high retaliatory tariffs on the United States of America, when Donald Trump is trying to do his deal or whatever, we don't want to follow that. We want to go and talk to Trump and explain that we're different and get a decent deal for Britain.
Well, China, of course, is at the centre of this, isn't it?
Yes.
Because he's saying he's going to put these tariffs on. It's aimed chiefly at China.
Yeah.
I think.
It is.
And if the European Union finish up, whether it's a fissy fit or whether it's an unsuccessful negotiation, I mean, we're actually... Maybe the Labour government might realise that Brexit could be quite advantageous.
Look, I think we're not necessarily going to agree on Brexit. I think, you know, there's been...
Well, we are where we are.
Well, they have done already, because they couldn't have done the VAT on school fees unless we were out
That's
of the EU.
true, that is true.
OK, so you've given one...
That is true.
You've given 1 point.
Not one I'd have wanted to do.
No, but self-government is about the right to get things right or wrong, but decide yourself.
Exactly.
Look, Nigel, I think you of all people would understand, right, people's frustration that on the sovereignty point and the immigration point, I understand where you're coming from. I don't agree, but I understand it. On the economic point, there's not going to be anyone that's going to tell me that's been advantageous for the United Kingdom economy in the last 8 years. I mean, the latest estimates has been £130 billion of damage to multiple sectors. You know, we talk about farming. Farming has been hit by red tape. Well, they're estimates, John.
Our trade is up with the EU.
So you think Brexit has been a good thing, John, do you?
Well, of course it's a good thing, and it could be a lot better if you and others would get behind it and use the freedoms.
It's not to do with us getting... We have to inhate it. It's not about me protesting. It's happened.
Alex, I know that there is this Ramona syndrome, and I fully understand. I should never be forgiven, and nor John, you know. But kind of 8 and a bit years on, what I'm saying to you is right now, it's happened. Whether you agree with it or not, it's happened. Right now, it could be to our advantage, because if we do finish up with 20% tariffs, 10% tariffs, whatever it may be, on European Union goods into America, we can negotiate our way out of that. Isn't that, on the face of it, a good thing?
But actually, I think most people don't want to see this tariff bidding war. You know, in fairness, in the United States, I know that Biden obviously kept it. You know, Trump is going to continue with tariffs to China. I don't think a lot of people want to see anything that's going to hurt small businesses, anything that's going to put prices up. And actually, you know, I think it's a dangerous rhetoric for all of these countries to say, oh, we're going to put your tariffs up, we're going to do tariffs on this.
Yeah,
we want to be doing free trade, very easy trade with all those countries. So the rhetoric needs to be toned down from all sides, I think.
Yeah,
isn't it good
I'm glad
news?
you agree with that, because I don't think we should be imposing tariffs, and we should see that we have this opportunity.
But if America do, we can get out of it.
Free trade advocate. And as you say, try and dampen all this bad noise. And as to the advantages of Brexit, a huge one is that they are borrowing 800 billion euros, and we don't have to share some of that debt. We've got quite enough debt of our own.
We've got plenty. Final quick thought on this point. Isn't it wonderful to have a pro-British president going into the White House?
Look, I
marvellous, isn't it?
I knew, to be honest, even though I wasn't happy, I knew that Trump would win. You know, I think a lot of people on the left do really need to understand that Trump was very strategic and very clever about how he won the election. What I would say is, I think regardless of who's in power, the UK is always going to be the most important partner, whether it was Kamala Harris or Trump. I don't think it's a situation where we're going to get a better deal now because Trump's in power.
Oh, I do.
Well,
I do. I do.
We're the most important ally for them, you know.
I do. Gosh, it's all through gritted teeth with you lot when it comes to Trump, isn't it? It really
Biden didn't want us to have a good deal with the EU. He was on their side over the crucial things like Northern Ireland, where the EU was not helping.
We're in a better position. A quick What the Farage moment, and it's not a happy one. I try and find jolly ones, but this one is virtually impossible. Berlin police chief says Jews and gay people should hide their identity when they're in Arab neighbourhoods in Berlin. Yes, Barbara Slawick has said that. And the thought that you can't be what you are in certain part of the cities, the thought 80 years on that Jews in Berlin have to be careful about their identity, is that where we're heading, John?
Well, it's very sad to hear a statement from someone with those responsibilities, and I hope they can work away at it and make sure that doesn't have to be true.
Is it coming here?
Devastating.
Is it coming here?
Well, I hope not. But again, all men and women of goodwill should be trying to make sure it doesn't. We should show our tolerance, and we should show that we don't want people to be so extreme that they make lives of the others uncomfortable.
The growth of extremism, Alex, I think in some parts of London is making life already tough for Jewish people. Is there anything we can do to stop this?
I think, and I know there's been some concern in certain pockets of our country, it is the minority. You know, it's the same with the riots, by the way. It was a very small percentage of people that were causing issues. And I think sometimes there is a portion of the media that decide they're going to really run with the story. And I think it's quite concerning because what it does is really divides communities, you know. If you have concerns about the cultural cohesion of the UK and of certain communities because you see a story in Germany. Firstly, Germany and the UK are very different, right? Completely different situation. You know, the economies run differently. You know, migration has been much higher in Germany than the UK. You know, the stats show that. And actually, there's no evidence to suggest that in broad parts of the UK, you know, whether it's the community I live in or most communities, people live in perfect harmony. It's going to be a portion of society that let everyone down.
I pray you're right. Germany have taken more refugees or illegal migrants than we have, but actually on legal migration we've taken far more pro rata than Germany. But we can argue those points. Well, yeah. We can argue those points till the cows come home. In a moment, let's discuss China. Should I say China? Keir Starmer seems to get on very well with President Xi. Is this Labour government going to take us much, much closer to China economically? And is that strategically the right thing to do?
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
The row over Prince Harry's US visa will be brought back into focus.
Earlier this year, Nigel Farage asked Donald Trump about this very issue. Let's take a listen.
No one knows the truth. What did he put on his American visa form?
If they know something about the drugs and if he lied, they'll have to take appropriate action.
Appropriate action? What could that mean?
Well, the fractured relationship between the president-elect and the royal couple, or ex-royal couple, I should say, began in 2020 when the Sussexes urged American voters to stay clear of Trump, urging them to reject hate speech, misinformation and online negativity.
OK, well, to break down this story for us, we're joined by royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, so what are the chances of Trump saying, you know what, Harry, time to get out of here?
I very strongly suspect that the new administration has other priorities, and also it wouldn't want the enormous amount of fuss. Can you just imagine it in hypothetical situations if it happened? I mean, we've seen Nigel Farage there get an answer from Donald Trump, which implied that this might be looked into, and it might.
The Americans say that if you have taken illegal drugs, you're not allowed immigration status. Prince Harry, in his book, said he'd taken illegal drugs, and there he is with American immigration status. I mean, how do the two things make sense? Either he lied in the book, or he lied to the US government.
I can't see that the future administration would want to be involved with problems with the British royal family, which obviously would occur if this happened.
Yeah, that's true. Richard Fitzwilliams, thank you very much, as ever.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
So I mentioned earlier the G20 summit is going on in Rio, and there's been a big get-together between Keir Starmer and President Xi. It's the first time for 6 years that a British Prime Minister has met the China boss, and I wonder quite where we are going with this. You see, I think there's an issue of trust, and I say that because today, of all days, a Hong Kong court has sentenced 45 of the pro-democracy activists to up to 10 years in prison under Beijing's national security law. And what's worth remembering is the deal that was signed at the time of the handover of Hong Kong. The treaty was explicit that for 50 years at least, Hong Kong would be autonomous. And China have broken that deal, and no one can argue the other way. And frankly, democracy has been crushed. Even debate in Hong Kong has been crushed. On the basis of that, the closer we get to China, can we actually trust them? So why is Keir Starmer doing this? Well, I think the truth is, folks, that we've made ourselves, frankly, so dependent economically on China that we find it very difficult to envisage not having good relations. I'm not pretending that dealing with China is easy for any Prime Minister. It's not. But I just have the feeling that maybe Keir Starmer thinks trade with China is the one thing we need to push up our economic growth, and maybe because of that, he's prepared to make some sacrifices, nay, even surrenders. I'm joined down the line by Luke de Pulford, Executive Director of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. Luke, welcome back to the programme. I know that you've been a great supporter of these pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong. It's a black day on that score, isn't it?
It is indeed. 45 people subjected to extremely harsh sentences. And why? What did they do wrong, according to the Chinese Communist Party and their apparatchiks in Hong Kong? Well, all they wanted to do was to organise a democratic primary election. That's what they've been sentenced to up to 10 years for having done. And what was the UK's reaction to that, given that we are, as you rightly point out, duty bearers under the Sino-British Joint Declaration? We made promises to uphold the autonomy and the way of life of people of Hong Kong. What have we done? What did we do? Well, we issued what seems to have been a hand-wringing statement from a junior minister. Nothing more. No accountability, nothing whatsoever, not even a statement from the Foreign Secretary. So Hong Kongers have been completely abandoned by us, I'm sorry to say.
No, I'm afraid I think that's absolutely right. Now, what is Starmer going to do? Is he just going to give to China virtually everything they want?
Well, there are a couple of test cases for this. If you look at the government's policy, the first thing is to say is that they made one manifesto commitment on China, one and one only, which was that they were going to do a China audit. And apparently our policy was going to be orientated by this audit. This audit hasn't happened yet and is ongoing, we think, won't be published probably until next year. Meanwhile, we see that a whole host of decisions, very consequential decisions around China policy have been taken. And the bellwether decision for me was the fact that Keir Starmer, in discussion with Xi Jinping, admitted that under pressure from the Chinese president after a phone call, had decided to call in the application for the mega embassy that China wants to build in Tower Hamlets over the old Royal Mint.
Yeah.
That's really significant. You know, there's supposed to be local planning autonomy there. The local residents are supposed to matter. But actually what's happened is Keir Starmer has said, well, you know, we'll call in that application, we'll take control of it, and it looks pretty likely that they're going to approve it under diplomatic pressure from China. And I think that's a bellwether decision that tells you a lot about the posture of the government.
Luke de Pulford, that's hot off the press. I didn't know that. Thank you very much indeed, as ever, for joining us. I have made the point, Alex, it's not easy. It's not easy for any Prime Minister. We've landed ourselves in a position of economic dependence to a certain degree. But what I just heard there is quite shocking.
So, yeah, I mean, look, the embassy has been an issue for a while. I know that China have been putting some pressure on, obviously there's discussions about whether, the local people should get their say. But also, I'll be honest, I really do think on China, it's too important not to get right, as you say. And actually, if potentially we have to cave a little bit, strategically it's so important. Lots of companies do trade. So, yeah, some people may be, from a sovereignty perspective, not happy. I get that. But it's not just the UK that has this issue, by the way. Lots of countries rely on trade with China. It's not just the UK.
No, I fully understand that. John, on the embassy, it does sound like we're conceding.
Well, we may do, but I think that the general point you're making is a very important one, that we are too dependent on Chinese imports. Everybody talks about trade, but we have a trade where we sell more to America than we buy from them. But with Europe and with China, we're in big deficit. And in China, it really matters because there's this political sting to the whole thing, which is very difficult. And if we take, for example, the government's aim that it wants to have lots of green jobs in Britain, that presumably means that we would make the solar panels, we would make the wind turbines.
We don't.
But we don't. And we import all these things from China. We're probably about to import a lot of half-price Chinese electric vehicles, doing enormous damage to our own vehicle manufacturing here. This is not a wise way of promoting this green philosophy.
John, you're naturally, by instinct, a free trader that doesn't like tariffs. But Trump, I mean, his primary reason for putting tariffs on China is to protect his own automotive industry. Does he have half a point?
Well, I think he does. And there's been a lot of analysis by the EU, actually, on this, where they've looked at whether there are clear cases of heavy subsidy and unrealistic costs and no profit margins and all those other things that somewhere like China will do to get dominance in a market before they then put the prices up. And they think there is evidence of that. Now, we ought to be doing our own competition inquiry into these Chinese goods, and if they are cheating, we need to retaliate.
Yeah, we do. It's, I guess, the government feels it's got no option, really. I guess the government feels that any barriers to trade could further damage growth in this country, which, well, frankly, there isn't much growth in this country. Just let me ask you, here we are just a few months in. The opinion polls, the personal ratings for Starmer have fallen through the floor. Do you think that's temporary? Do you think he can bounce?
Yeah, I think it's temporary. I think he's been let down. He's had some poor advisors around him. I think, people have made some poor choices. I do accept that the whole issue with, who's paying for suits and all of that absolute nonsense that keeps dragging out is just not good, because there's lots of issues that the Conservatives left us behind. He's got to sort out, It's going to take a long time. They've only been in power a couple of months. It's going to take, we've got a 5-year parliament. So really, opinion polls fluctuate. We all know that, Sometimes you're popular, sometimes you're not, as you and many people will know. And actually, politicians sometimes are judged fairly in a moment. They have a good day, they have a bad day. In my opinion, he's been let down by some poor advisors. And actually, I think in the next few years, they'll start to get growth, they'll start to get things moving, they'll help, the NHS, they'll help schools, and, where it matters, I think they'll do OK.
All right. Final thought for the programme, John, from you. Have you ever known a government get off to a worse start?
No, I don't think I have. And it's depressing, because I want my country to be well governed. And when they said they wanted to be the fastest growing economy of the G7, I thought, great, I'm with you. And then they said they wanted a growth strategy. I said, yeah, I can write you one of those. And then they do everything that stops us growing. Taxes everywhere, regulations everywhere, and trading with the wrong people everywhere. It's just awful.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to all of you at home. We had some very passionate debates tonight, not least of which Jacob was, on the whole farming issue, this perception that they're all incredibly rich because their land is now worth a lot of money. You were there, weren't you?
I was there, and neighbours of ours from Somerset had come along. These are people who work incredibly hard. They work, all our dairy farmers get up at 4:30 in the morning. They can't take holidays, or very rarely, because who else does it when they're not there? They make a very small return on capital. Said that farmers make on average 0.5% a year. That means that 20% tax takes 40 years to pay off. Wow. That's more than a generation of farmers. It's an outrageous tax. And how gentle and polite and democratic they were.
Oh, they were lovely.
They did it all properly. They didn't glue themselves to the ground. It was a proper democratic argument that they were putting forward. I thought it was very impressive, very powerful, and I hope the government will react to it.
I hope they will. If not, it'll have to spread across the rest of the country. We're coming up with Jacob in a moment, State of the Nation. First, though, let's have a look at the all-important and chilly weather.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. I'm here with your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Lots of cold weather around at the moment, some harsh frosts, also some wintry showers in places too. But why is it unseasonably cold? Well, the low pressure system that brought the last night's heavy rain and snow for some parts has now cleared away towards the east, and that's allowed for us to drag in our air from the north, a cold direction, bringing Arctic air to many places. It is quite a clear air mass though, so for many it's actually going to be dry overnight, the exception being in places exposed to that brisk northerly wind where we will see frequent wintry showers with some snow accumulations building up in places and icy patches too. Because of the clear skies and that northerly wind, temperatures plummeting tonight, a widespread harsh frost. Across parts of Scotland, temperatures last night dropped to -11, and it could be even colder than that this coming night, -12 perhaps in some places with lying snow. First thing tomorrow morning, a harsh frost then across Scotland. Watch out for some icy patches and some lying snow in places, particularly towards the north. A similar story across parts of Northern Ireland, down the eastern side of England and also into parts of Wales. Here there will be some fairly frequent showers, and they could quite readily be falling as sleet or snow, and so some disruption is quite likely as we go through the morning rush hour. Elsewhere and further inland, a lot of dry weather to be had, and it is generally going to stay dry and sunny as we go through tomorrow. But still, in areas exposed to that brisk northerly wind, we will continue to see some showers, and they could penetrate a bit further inland at times. These temperatures are significantly below average for the time of year, and when you factor in some strong winds coming from the north, it is going to feel bitterly cold. As we go into Thursday, there is the potential for some unsettled weather to push into the southwest. Bit of uncertainty, we could see some heavy rain, perhaps even some snow over the higher ground here. Further north, it's a similar day to today really, wintry showers continuing to pile in from the north, otherwise some sunny spells. By Saturday, things are looking very wet and windy indeed. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation. Tonight, thousands of farmers took to the streets of Whitehall to take a stand against Labour's brutal war against landowners in our agricultural industry. As well as speaking to someone directly affected by Labour's tax hikes, I'll be speaking to the Shadow Minister for the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Dr Neil Hudson. In other news, more revelations have emerged about the Chancellor's past claims about her qualifications, and it could spell trouble for her. Find out what she claimed in a moment. Plus, just to secure Starmer kowtows to the Chinese communists over a mega embassy, dozens of Hong Kong activists are imprisoned by the brutal regime in its latest free speech crackdown. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most pugnacious panel, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the journalist and author, Michael Crick. As always, as you know, I want to hear from you. Let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's your favourite part of the day, the News Bulletin with Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Jacob. The time is 1 minute past 8, and these are your latest headlines. Farming leaders have accused the Chancellor of refusing to engage with them over controversial changes to inheritance tax. That's as thousands of farmers have marched on Westminster today. First unveiled in Rachel Reeves' budget, the plans to impose inheritance tax on farms worth more than £1 million have